the why behind the what. Why do we do what we do? And, I think that's really important for employees and trustees and volunteers and everybody involved in the church, especially in the social ministries of the churches, to understand, well, what are the foundational principles? And so what I've tried to do is to invite guest speakers to come in and to do this. A couple of reasons. I wanted us to feel more connected to these people in the community, and also for you to hear different perspectives. You all listen to me talk all the time. And full disclosure, Bishop was supposed to cover one of these topics, and he's just so busy, we just could not make it happen. And so what we've decided to do, because we're running short of calendar, and I personally am running short of time with you, I said, let's cover the last two topics together in one session. So that's the plan for today. I don't have an hour worth of material to share with you. You don't want to listen to me talk for an hour. You have to do that already every day. But what I did do is pull some information together from the various Vatican and the USCCB websites. The booklet on the table is a couple of years old, but this was put together by the New York State Catholic Conference. So, and for those of you who don't know, the New York State Catholic Conference is the formal advocacy arm of the New York State bishops. Each bishop, on behalf of their diocese, each diocese pays dues to fund this small group. I think there are maybe 4 or 5 staff. They are in Albany, and they advocate on behalf of social issues that are of importance to the church across the diocese. So, for example, if you're plugged into their email right now, you have probably seen that through the Catholic Action Network, opportunities to click on a link and encourage Governor Hochul to veto the Medical Aid in Dying Act, which has some euphemistic name, but basically it's assisted suicide. And they've done a nice job laying out why the church teaches that this is contrary to our faith. So the Catholic Conference directly tries to advocate for the principles of Catholic social teaching, as well as the church's moral teaching in the public square, right? So it's this particular pamphlet lays out the principles of Catholic social teaching as it applies to the work that they do. And so we have a whole pile full of these. I encourage you to take them. If you want more, I can get more. We have a bunch. So with that, today we're going to cover 2 principles, rights and responsibilities, as well as the dignity of work and the rights of workers. So first, rights and responsibilities. I'm going to read a paragraph to you. The Catholic tradition teaches that human dignity can be protected and a healthy community can be achieved only if human rights are protected and responsibilities are met. Human rights and responsibilities, again. Therefore, every person has a fundamental right to life and a right to those things required for human decency. Corresponding to these rights are duties and responsibilities to one another, to our families, and to the larger society. That's a quote right off of the bishop's website. This is the United States Council of Catholic Bishops. So that's not just New York State, that's the bishops across the US. And this is these principles are not only US principles, these are worldwide principles. And I'll talk a little bit about the history because that's pretty fascinating. But first, a reading from the Gospel according to Luke. There was a rich man who dressed in purple garments and fine linen and dined sumptuously each day. Lying at his door was a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who would gladly have eaten his fill of the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. Dogs even used to come and lick his sores. When the poor man died, he was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. And from the netherworld, where he was in torment, he raised his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he cried out, Father Abraham, have pity on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am suffering torment in these flames. Abraham replied, My child, remember that you received what was good during your lifetime, while Lazarus likewise received what was bad. But now he is comforted here, whereas you are tormented. Moreover, between us and you, a great chasm is established to prevent anyone from crossing who might wish to go from our side to yours or from your side to ours. He said that I beg your father, send him to my father's house, where I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they too come to this place of torment. But Abraham replied, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. He said, oh no, Father Abraham, but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. Then Abraham said, they will not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded by someone who should rise from the dead. Poignant story. So just for a moment, think about which character in this parable do we identify with? Do you identify with? Do you see yourself as Lazarus, or do you see yourself as the rich man? Anybody?
I think it's interchangeable. Depends on what's going on in your life at that time. You could have a need, a great need, whether you get an illness, a severe illness, you're in great need. Potentially cancer diagnosis, you need medical treatment, maybe you can't get it, you don't have access to it. On the other hand, you could also be on the flip side, someone who has everything, it's just that at that moment, things seem to be going well, and you've got an abundance.
Thank you. Someone else?
Somewhere in the middle. I wouldn't see them as two extremes.
Yeah.
And that with Sherry, that was very enlightening, but, yeah, you can move to either end of that scale.
Yeah. It's the beauty of these parables is they're meant to engage the listener into the story. It's not easy. It's not black and white. It doesn't, you don't walk away and say, well, I'm fine. It's supposed to tease your mind into action and touch you in the.
Bad for Lazarus. Nice somehow. Been around.
Now he's in paradise.
Yeah. Let me read you.
Yeah, the rough going on. Yeah.
The rough going.
Yeah.
I also kind of see it as a foretelling of Jesus who rose from the dead. Who's going to listen to him?
Yeah. So carry this. I mean, so this gospel is Luke. He's written this years after Jesus rose from the dead and ascended. And he's using this metaphorical, he's putting these words into Jesus' mouth, right? Which Jesus likely spoke in some form or another. But he's saying that they won't even listen to me after I rise from the dead. So you carry this forward to today, and you look at the characters that we see in our community today. Who's the rich man? Who's Lazarus? Just broadly speaking, it's real easy to sort of ascribe these things to other people. Well, hang on to those thoughts for a moment. I have a couple more quotes for you. These are a little bit more difficult. This one comes from Pope Leo XIII in his first apostolic exhortation entitled "I Have Loved You." This was released when we were in Puerto Rico for the Catholic Charities annual gathering. So I had hours on the plane, and I actually read the whole document, which is really cool. I encourage you to do that, or at least read a summary. Read a summary written by somebody scholarly, not an AI summary. Just saying. This paragraph is highlighted on my tablet because it really spoke to me. It's the 91st paragraph, so it's deep. And the document's only 25 pages long, so it's not terrible. But it's written like all these papal documents, it's pretty dense. Anyway, charity has the power to change reality. It's a genuine force for change in history. It is the source that must inspire and guide every effort to resolve the structural causes of poverty, and to do so with urgency. It is my hope we will see more and more politicians capable of sincere and effective dialogue aimed at healing the deepest roots and not simply the appearances of the evils in our world. For it is a matter of hearing the cry of entire peoples, the poorest peoples of the earth. Well, again, this is addressed to the world, not just to our nation. Second, 2 paragraphs later, In his encyclical De Lexit Nos, Pope Francis reminded us that social sin consolidates a structure of sin within a society and is frequently part of a dominant mindset that considers normal or reasonable what is merely selfishness and indifference. This then gives rise to social alienation. It then becomes normal to ignore the poor and live as if they do not exist. It then likewise seems reasonable to organize the economy in such a way that sacrifices are demanded of the masses in order to serve the needs of the powerful. Meanwhile, the poor are promised only a few drops that trickle down until the next global crisis brings things back to where they were. A genuine form of alienation is present when we limit ourselves to theoretical excuses instead of seeking to resolve the concrete problems of those who suffer. St. John Paul II had already observed that a society is alienated if its forms of social organization, production, and consumption make it more difficult to offer the gift of self and to establish solidarity between people. It's 2 excerpts, and we've just covered 3 books. Those things really spoke to me as I look at the world we live in, specifically in the work that we do. So, just share, where do we see disregard for the poor in our community? Go ahead. I mean, you just jump in. We're not going to write them down because we don't have enough paper.
Streets, the homeless,
The homeless, the mentally ill, the immigrants, anybody who's brown skinned, anybody who's a Democrat. Right? I mean, what are we seeing on the national stage? But right here in our community, just as you drive around Western New York and you drive from one neighborhood to the other. Something that really struck me coming into this work was the differences between how people live from where I lay my head at night and where most of the people we serve lay their heads. Whether it's Wellsville or Batavia or the east side or the west, I mean, up and down, There are times when I go home and I just weep. I think, oh my God, I only get to live here because of all the social structures that enabled me to live the life that I've led, and the people that don't have those same structures. And this is kind of what this teaching gets to, is we have responsibilities for each other. It's a Mother Teresa quote. The problem with the world is we've forgotten we're responsible for each other. And I think that's why what we do here is so important. Name a couple of the things that we do to assist the poor, please.
my basic needs. Food, shelter, clothing.
I agree. What else do people get when they come to one of our programs? Besides help, respect, dignity,
Hope,
hope,
Fellowship.
belonging.
right? You don't hear those words on social media or on Fox News or CBS News or in the newspaper. They're just not present, right? In fact, you hear the opposite. You hear politicians decrying the fact that people without legal status are receiving health care in our emergency rooms, and isn't that terrible? So there's a huge dichotomy between what we see and what we do. We collectively are being attacked. When I say we, the church and specifically Catholic Charities is being attacked for the work that we do in the press. It's been going on for years, most pointedly since January. We have been criticized for helping people who are strangers, helping people who are poor, helping people who are mentally ill. And we probably say, no, this is what we do because, we're Catholics. This is what the church does. So let's turn it a little bit. What kinds of things could we do to help our neighbors recognize our collective responsibility for assisting the vulnerable people among us? What can we do as witnesses to this work, to try to help people around us recognize that we're all responsible. It's not just the church's responsibility. We're all responsible for each other.
Stay true to our mission.
Leading by example.
Yeah. People know where you work, right? You work in accounting, right? You're not you're not handing out food at the pantry, but you're still supporting the work that we do. People know you work for Catholic Charities, you know. Just because you're doing compliance and HR and finance and, you know, we're all supporting the work. We're, you know, we may not be directly involved, but you go to, you know, birthday parties, funerals, Christmas parties, you have conversations with people. And people are interested to know. This material here I mentioned a few minutes ago, getting involved in the public square, something else we're called to do. As baptized Christians, we are called to evangelize. That means to spread the gospel. And it doesn't necessarily mean reading from scriptures like I just did. It means leading by example. People see what you do and they pay attention. If you're getting up on Sunday morning and piling your kids into the car to go to mass, your neighbor across the street who's cutting the grass or putting their golf clubs into the car sees you. You're living by example. It's important, right?
Isn't that just being the servant leader as well?
It is.
Right, doing the work that we are asking others to do, and you know, St. Francis lying with the lepers as a example to his peers, no different than when Jesus did as well, right? So I think living the mission and being a servant leader is really important to being that example to our community, no matter what leader and.
Yeah, absolutely. We are different. We are countercultural. If we're not getting pushback from the powers of this world, to use that metaphor, the rich man in this parable signifies the people who rule the world, people with the authority, the people who govern, the people with the wealth, the people who have the ability to control how the society works. That's the rich man in this parable. And Lazarus is all the vulnerable people who are subject to those actions. So if you pull back and you watch what's going on in the community and in the world stage, right? That's where we are. And so to have that perspective and then to try to say, wait a minute, this is wrong. That's countercultural. You voice that opinion in a party. And you know, someone's going to say, wait a minute, that's wrong. Those people don't deserve what they're getting. They're freeloading on the public dime. No, they're getting help because they need help. The structures of our society have placed these people at a disadvantage. So to be countercultural is to really, this is what Jesus taught. Because things weren't any different in Jesus' day than they are today. They really weren't. And he really angered the powers that were in authority at the time, both the religious and the political powers that were in authority, who worked together like this. And they killed them. This is how it goes. So if we're not getting pushback from the world, I would argue we're not doing this right. If we propose to be Christians, we ought to live in a way that people go, whoa, that's different. Something that's been on my heart. We are at a juncture in time. We collectively, as a people, as a nation, as people of faith, 100 years ago, the idea of using public money to help people was anathema. Social Security did not exist. Public health insurance did not exist. People who weren't able to provide for themselves ended up, you know, sick and dying on the street. The Catholic Church stepped up to do the social work that needed to be done because the Catholic Church at the time had the wherewithal to do that, right? Basically, you know, that's how Catholic Charities was formed. You guys all know the history. We raise money and we help people. Over the years, social supports have grown and the society has decided that it's a good thing to do for us collectively to collect taxes from the citizens and to fund the social program. That pendulum is swinging back the other way. That social contract seems to be being thrown out the window. So what do we do to respond? Okay. Many of the programs that we operate here are funded by taxpayer dollars, one way or another, right? Whether it's a county, state, city, federal contract. We're leveraging about 85% of our budget comes from taxpayer dollars, which is a good thing because we're using the money that comes from our fellow community members to help our other fellow community members. We're merely a conduit for a lot of that. But in between, we do stuff with donor dollars that public money doesn't do. I argue that as the next few years unfold, we're going to see some of that public money shrink. Some of these programs will likely wind down, and the need for trying to fund our work with philanthropy is gonna continue to grow. I'm not arguing that the appeal is gonna, grow in size dollar-wise, but we, as a percentage of the agency funding, might very well see our focus more on philanthropy work. That's a charge for the board. I will be participating, but not from a formal seat in the organization. But that's the reason I bring that up is it goes right to this. It's rights and responsibilities. This is why Catholic Charities is important. So let me switch to dignity of rights and workers because they're really kind of tied together. Again, a paragraph from the USCCB. The economy must serve people, not the other way around. I repeat, the economy must serve people, not the other way around. Work is more than a way to make a living. It is a form of continuing participation in God's creation. If the dignity of work is to be protected, then the basic rights of workers must be respected. The right to productive work, the decent and fair wages, to the organization and joining of unions, to private property, and to economic initiative. A lot in there. Another gospel reading, because I'm a deacon, it's what I do. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out at dawn to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with them for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. Going out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You too, go into my vineyard, and I will give you what is just." So they went off. He went out again around noon and around 3 and did likewise. Going out about 5 o'clock, he found others standing around and said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They answered, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You too, go into my vineyard." When it was evening, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Summon the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last, ending with the first." When those who had started about 5 o'clock came, each received the usual daily wage. So when the first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also got the usual daily wage. And on receiving it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last ones worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who bore the day's burden and the heat." Said one of them in reply, "My friend, I'm not cheating you. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what is yours and go. What if I wish to give the last one the same as you? Am I not free to do as I wish with my own money? Are you envious because I'm generous? Thus the last will be first and the first will be last." A lot to this story. Focus on the idea of a just wage for a just day's work. We all can identify with the people who worked all day long and labored, and yet the other people got paid the same. I've read some commentaries that use this metaphor for people getting into heaven. People think you earn your way into heaven by being really good your whole life and following the commandments and doing good works and so forth. By the way, faith and works are required for salvation, not just works. But some people think that, like, well, I do these things, therefore I'm right. And it translates into their life in the public square. Right? And so it's not fair for that person to get something that they didn't work for as hard as I did. It's the human competition. Again, it's a parable that really kind of tears at your heart. But what I wanted to point out to you is our newest pope, he chose the name Leo. And the last pope with that name was Leo the 13th. Now this was the 14th, right? Leo the 13th was known for his encyclical Rerum Novarum. It's a seminal document of the church. It translates into English as of new things or of revolutionary change. It was written in 1891, And it takes a critical look at the Industrial Revolution and the ideologies of socialism and capitalism that had taken root in the world. Two different ideas. So socialism predates Marxism and communism. Right? So at the time, these were the two ideologies that dominate the world stage. Does this sound familiar? Right? So the document's widely recognized as the foundational document of Catholic social teaching. So all the stuff we've been talking about goes back to 1891, Rerum Novarum. Predates, and remember, the church is older than any government on the planet. And the church has been teaching principles of how to live in the world as people of faith since the very beginning. And at the time, the church said, look, the Industrial Revolution, there's stuff going on here we need to talk about. Because if you think about what you learned in school about the Industrial Revolution, it was the advent of the machine. It was the advent of assembly line. It's the advent of heavy machinery and being able to make more stuff faster. And it really changed the economies. And you had all kinds of things like child labor going on. You had people dying at work, and what the workplace would do is bring your corpse back and dump it in your front yard. That was considered being generous to your family. There was no life insurance. There was no health insurance. There was no social safety net. People were basically parts of the machinery that made the economy go. And so they were serving the economy, not being served by it. And they were beginning to organize into unions to protect themselves. And the church said, yes, you have the right to do this. These are anathema today, right? Because we've seen unions when we were children, many of us. Unions were like a big deal. It really lost popularity. So what I wanted to point out is when Leo, when this Pope, right, who has his life experience, chose the name Leo, he was making a statement. He was making a statement about the world today and what kinds of church teaching he wants to focus on, which is really, really encouraging. It's not a very big departure from what Pope Francis had been doing. And oh, by the way, Pope Francis riled a lot of feathers, if you think back to some of the things he'd written, right? So in the years since Rerum Novarum, succeeding popes have written documents commemorating the anniversary. There was one at 40 years, there was one at 80 years, and John Paul II wrote one at the 100-year anniversary. He always named them on the anniversary of Rerum Novarum. That's what a big deal this was. And so I was so excited when he said Leo. I went, whoa, this is the foundation of Catholic social teaching. Also the foundation of this is why all people who work in specifically Catholic and Christian social ministries are so excited for what this Pope is paying attention to. Going back to that document I mentioned, read that summary, see what people are writing about it. It directly impacts our work. And Pope Leo wrote a lovely letter of encouragement to the Catholic Charities people from across the country. We shared that in email with all of you while we were still at the annual gathering. It's really kind of special to have the Pope say, keep up the good work, guys, you're doing the right stuff, in the vernacular. I think it's amazing. But the principles that we get from Rerum Novarum include the dignity of the human person. You've heard that over and over and over in all the principles we've talked about. The common good. Common good. We hear that in the secular world. We hear that in law. This comes from Rerum Novarum. This was a new idea. Subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is a church word. It means basically trying to bring authority and influence to the very fundamental level of human existence. So to put it in terms of the way human beings are organized, the family is the fundamental unit of the church and of the community. Everything starts with the family. And then you have the larger family, then you have the neighborhood, then you have the community, then you have, the church believes and teaches that we ought to try to do everything we can at the lowest possible level, right? Once again, government works this way. Is all politics is local? Yeah, it is. Who you elect to the school board in your neighborhood matters, because that's what's going to affect your day-to-day life, right? You think about that principle and what we're seeing today, oh my God. The principle of subsidiarity is out the window. But this is a principle that has made its way through the way the church teaches, but also through many of the things we as a community have come to believe. Rights and duties of property ownership. He calls out, it's okay to own property, but you also have a responsibility when you own property. That's what Sherry said. You know, the giving alms is not a nice thing to do. It's a responsibility. The preferential option for the poor. This is a big one. Church has been teaching this since Reverend Navarro. But what it means is we need to pay attention to the poor in a preferential way. If you're given a choice between making two decisions, one prefers the rich, one prefers the middle class, one prefers the status quo, and one favors the poor at the expense of those others, the option goes to the poor. Again, read this latest document. It's really impressive. And then lastly, the right of association, right of trade unions. This is sort of the beginning of like the Knights of Columbus started back then in the United States because the members of the church were being abused by the employers. The Knights of Columbus got together and said, we need to take care of of these guys who are our fellow parishioners who are working in the mill, working in the mine, working in the factory. And they got together and they formed basically an insurance company to say, we're going to chip in money. And when Bill dies, we'll have some money to take care of Bill's widow. And these are things that the church has done, or subsets of the church. It's pretty cool. In 1991, Pope, now St. John Paul II, wrote this, commemorated 100 years since Reverend Navarro. I'm quoting, the obligation to earn one's bread by the sweat of one's brow also presumes the right to do so. A society in which this right is systematically denied, in which economic policies do not allow workers to reach satisfactory levels of employment, cannot be justified from an ethical point of view, nor can that society attain social peace. John Paul II grew up during the labor union strikes in Poland, Lech Walesa, the breaking up of the Soviet Union. He was, on the scene during some huge social and economic change. And he's calling out that we can't rely on the mechanisms of society for ethical justice. He's not citing scripture. None of this is citing scripture. None of this is citing, they're just calling out a fundamental human truth. So I'm excited about all this because this is why we exist. This is why we come to work here every day, to try to work for these things. Can anyone offer examples of where we see the rights of workers being infringed upon today?
People are working with their pay, the government shut it down. Either not working and not getting paid, or working and not getting paid.
People being replaced by robots.
Oh, bingo. So that's a place, robots and AI. We're at the brink of a new industrial revolution. It's what we're reading in the press, right? We are looking at how we can use AI. But what if technology replaces people's jobs? I mean, on one hand, you can point to the economic efficiency. On the other hand, you can point to the person who doesn't have a job. The economy exists to serve people, not the other way around. So where's the moral justice in replacing people's jobs with technology? It's been happening our whole lifetimes, right? With automation and technology. And where do you stop and say, well, just because we can does not mean we should? And it's a juncture. Right now, I've been reading about this, I'm still a business guy at heart. There's a two-faced economy. The shopping and the spending that the consumers in our country are doing right now is being driven by the top 2% of the economy, basically the wealthy people. Because they're still buying luxury cars and condos and taking trips and all that stuff. But the people who are at the lower end of the economy, right, the workers, are tightening their belts and they're worried and they're lining up at food pantries. And this is where our economy is right now because this is where our social structures have taken us. And so all those people who are working people, think about when we had COVID. Who was most impacted by COVID? Working people. You work at a gas station, you work in a nursing home, you work someplace where you can't work remotely. Those people were most impacted by COVID. Those people are most impacted now with healthcare costs and with the cost of food. The structure of our economy is basically abusing the working class. And we need to be aware of it. We need to be talking to our public officials about it. And we need to be voting with this in mind. And what we're seeing right now is everything else you read in the paper, the rich men, the rich men versus Lazarus are telling us the opposite. Vote thinking of your own wallet, vote thinking of your own family, vote thinking of your own security first. I got mine, the hell with you. That's the way the world works, right? But if we're Christians, we're supposed to be countercultural. And that's what this whole Catholic social teaching stuff ought to get us thinking about. And so, yeah, if you think back over all the principles we've covered, they all kind of tie together the same way. I'm glad that the current federal government criticizes us and tells the rest of the world that we're doing the wrong thing. Because that kind of pushback from the powers of the world helps me to feel like we're on the right track. Bad, crucify us. We're doing what Jesus calls us to do, not what the world calls us to do. And this is countercultural, and this is the good stuff. It's also hard. That's all I have for you today. I didn't want to chew up a whole hour, and we've only gone 40 minutes. I would welcome if anybody wants to share feedback or discussion on more of this. We can. I'll do this all day. I love this.
I think it would be helpful for people of faith and parishes to hear this message. I know we tell them what we do, but maybe a reminder of why we do it. And sometimes we hear that from our church leaders, but maybe it needs to be clear from us in the times we're living in. Because I don't think everybody considers where this originated from and why it's more important than ever.
Yeah,
Why
Yeah.
it's under attack.
yeah. I mean,
To
we
give
have
mixed
been,
messages.
Oh, yeah.
Big community.
oh, we have, and we have tried in all of our social media posts and certainly when we go out to talk to parishes, we try. We are a little bit more gentle in our approach. If you come to one of my parishes when I'm giving a homily, you've just heard a homily. This is what you get from Deacon Steve. I can tell you that if you hear Deacon Don Weigel give a homily, this is what you'll hear from Deacon Don. Our pastors get letters because it's disquieting to comfortable people sitting in pews who throw $5 in the plate and think, well, I've done what I need to do. Sorry, no. I voted for this guy because whatever. You need to be really engaged in the public square, and it's hard. It really is. But you're right. I think the most effective way for this information to get out into the community is through each one of us. We all have friends, family, associates, neighbors that we talk to every day. And you have a tremendous ability to teach them. Not that you're going to quote popes, you're not. But to say, hey, the church has been teaching this for years. And just topics come up all the time where you can stop and think, oh, here's an opportunity for me to tell, what I believe and why.
The difference is there's more curiosity right now about the Catholic faith, Leo, and where this is all going to go. I mean, I hear people who are non-Catholic, saying, oh, this is exciting. Tell me more. What does this mean? So, being able to share our message, people who are not of faith, they understand, we actually value the same things. Maybe being able to bridge that.
If you sit down with a person who's educated in the Jewish faith, or the Muslim faith, or most of the mainstream Protestant faiths, you will find commonality on all of this. And this just happens to be the Catholic take on it. We're using Catholic language, but there's a lot of commonality. People of goodwill of most faith traditions and people of goodwill without a faith tradition can easily line up on these principles on a purely sociological or moral or ethical basis, right? It doesn't have to be religious. We happen to approach it this way because this is the way we're built. I feel strongly that because this is Catholic Charities and because this is a ministry of the church, we need to stay that course. I really believe that we have the Holy Spirit guiding us in this work in gentle ways. And that's why this organization has survived for as many years as we have, because this is God's project and He wants it to keep going in some form. Ministry is just good works done in the name of Jesus Christ. The people across the street do good works, and they're still good works. Ethically and morally, JFS is doing great stuff. So is IID. So is United Way. I don't have any problem with any of that. We just happen to be different because we're doing this as a ministry. God willing, we'll all continue to thrive.
But I think that's what would help probably the community at large is drawing on the similarities that there is, that every faith is really, most faiths, I shouldn't say every, are based in the same foundation of that's very similar to what Catholics are doing. And I think people miss the mark sometimes and view us or we set ourselves as different, but you know, what is
Common goals.
same common goals, it might be a little bit different. Buddhists are based in compassion. Compassion is the same as dignity, providing, it's, the language is a little bit different, but I think we miss the mark sometimes by trying to differentiate ourselves from as this is the way, but I think there's a lot of commonality from all faith.
Yeah.
That should be highlighted to get buy-in and partnership.
Trying to find common ground is important. Again, looking at what the world is doing right now, division is the flavor of the day. I get theological on you for a moment. The opposite spirit that is not God seeks division and deceit and discord. And that spirit that is not God, some call that Satan, actively works on a regular basis to divide us from one another, to pit us against one another, to identify the differences and make us hate one another. That's the very definition of sin. And so that's the way the world is. So if we counter that, try to find commonality and try to love one another, then we're trying to counter that. That's the same message. So yeah, it's not going to resolve. Jesus promised us 2,000 years ago that the world will hate you if you are my follower. Okay, sign me up. Meantime, keep doing the work. We're doing good work. We've got great reasons to draw on. There is a world of information out there. You Google CST or Catholic Social Teaching. There's videos, there's documents. I've got books. I took classes in the seminary. I mean, you can go as deep as you want. Once again, I'll endorse reading at least a summary of this latest encyclical. It's titled, I Have Loved You. It's sweet. It was started by Pope Francis and finished by Pope Leo. So it's really, he says, Francis started this work, I'm finishing it. And so he adds his own flavor in, but it's a lot of Francis. And what the popes do is they quote each other and they quote scripture and they quote catechism. There's something like 150 footnotes. Like the document itself ends at page 25. There's another 10 pages of notes. You know, like a term paper. It's written like that. So, and if you go to the Vatican website, you can link all this stuff. You could really go deep, or you can just read that, or just find a good summary. If you're looking for a good summary, there are a number of reputable sources that you can read, and you probably won't go too long. It's encouraging. I feel good about it. I feel good about us and where we stand in relation to where we are. And I think although in our diocese we're coming through a difficult time, I'm confident that this too will pass, and in the long run, we collectively as an agency and as a diocese and as a church, we're gonna be fine.